Okay, well, because we extended the last speaker, Randy Benson graciously said that he would sort of give up his time to that, and the films that he's got some excerpts from. He's a award-winning documentary filmmaker, and he's been making a film about the researchers called The Searchers, and he's going to show some excerpts tonight instead during the movie night period at 10 o'clock for people that can be here then. So I just went down and got our next speaker, who figures into the history of the case, was an FBI agent in Chicago in 1963, and inadvertently got involved in unearthing the Chicago plot to kill Kennedy at the time of the Army-Navy game, and has since written a book, Echoes of Dallas, about his experience of not only doing that, but then getting in trouble for doing that, and especially as one of the first and few black agents in the FBI got falsely imprisoned, Abraham Bolden. So he's coming up. I'm going to talk in the next period, and then we'll follow that with Doug Ballantyne on a remote. And Ed Haslam's here, I know. Haven't seen John Armstrong, but he's scheduled for 4:30, and then we break for dinner. So come on up, Mr. Bolden. Thank you. Do you want to sit up here? Do you want to sit and I can move the mic?
I'll stand.
You will? All right.
Yes, I'll stand a little
Need to
bit.
sit just all right.
Are we all ready to go? So how is everybody today? I'm doing okay for an old man. Well, first, I need to adjust this mic a little bit.
What do you need? Up, down?
I'm stepping on the face. That's
All right.
size 11.
There you go.
Okay, that's much better. It's just like dancing with a girl and stepping on her feet. You know, it's sort of awkward feeling. It doesn't hurt you, but it's an awkward feeling for her. I would just like to start off my little talk here with praises due to Almighty God, who permitted me to be here today, and who is the perfection of all love, harmony, and beauty. I always do that because by His grace I'm here today. Because during my lifetime I have seen a lot of misery. I was raised up in a highly segregated city, East St. Louis, Illinois, born in 1935. I was educated in East St. Louis, Illinois, became quite a musician, and I'm sort of skimming because I don't have too much time. I became quite a trumpet player during my life. They used to call me Little Satchmo. And I couldn't figure out whether it was because I looked like him or played like him. But they called me Little Satchmo, and I was very serious about music. My father demanded that all of his children take music lessons when they reached the age of 9 years old, because it taught them discipline, taught them to partial out their time. They had to be at a certain particular place at a certain time, and that taught them an inner discipline. That's the way my dad explained it to me as he was whipping me for missing a couple of lessons. So he drove that into me pretty good. Now, I graduated from Lincoln High School. I had a couple of scholarships in music, one to Millikan University, another one to Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. Now, in the meantime, I had two mentors who were very close to the family, and they were law enforcement individuals. One was Leo J. Gooden, who was a deputy sheriff. Another person was a person named Lucius Hogan, who was an East St. Louis detective. And they influenced me because they were always cautioning us guys. They would set us down and talk to us when we would do little acts and things. And I began to admire them. I liked them because they were policemen and they were upholders of the law. As a matter of fact, when I went off to college, I started at one time to major in law, to be a lawyer. But I had other sisters and brothers who were going to college at the same time. And since I had a scholarship, I felt it might be unfair to take from them in order to go to law school. I graduated from Lincoln University cum laude. I was third in the class of '95. I had a 3.9 on a 4-point average. And in the process of my graduation, I was offered a job in southern Missouri, Hayti, Missouri. And I turned it down because in the meantime, my wife, who passed away in 2005 after 49 years of marriage, she saw an ad in the newspaper. They were looking for a detective at the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. And she says, Abe, you know, you've been talking about being a policeman. Why don't you apply for this job? And I said, oh, they're not going to hire a Negro. You know how Pinkerton is. They're not going to hire a detective. I say, if I want to be a guard, yeah, they might hire me, but not a detective. You have that reputation. She says, well, go in and try anyway. So I put on my $39.95 Sears and Roebuck suit and went over there Monday morning, 705 Olive Street. And I walked in the office, a little girl was typing on the typewriter, and there were offices directly behind her. I said, I came to apply for the detective job that you have open. She said, we don't have a job open. I said, yes, you do. And I pulled out this little ad that my wife had insisted that I take, and I showed it to her. She looked up at me and made no bones about it. She said, we're not hiring people like you. And so I wasn't going to stand there and fight. So I was reaching for the door when a tall gentleman, graying on the side, he entered behind the counter where the secretary was and said, what seems to be the problem out here? And she says, he's looking for a job. And I just told him, we don't have one open. He says, yes, we do. Says, give him my application. Have him to fill it out and come see me. And that's what I did. I filled it out. And Mr. Mertz, who was the agent in charge of the division of St. Louis, Michigan, and Ohio around in there, he hired me. And he told me, he says, Abraham, I want you to do a good job. He says, because I'm hiring you, you're the first Negro detective that we hired. And so I want you to do an outstanding job. So I became the first African-American Pinkerton detective in 1956. That's a little known fact among many people. Now, my wife was reading the paper. She was an avid paper reader. But she was always looking out for me. She saw this ad in the paper for Illinois State Policeman and says, well, you're complaining about the pay at Pinkerton, why don't you apply for this? They pay quite a bit more. So I did, and I became an Illinois State Policeman. So in the process of being an Illinois State Policeman, there was a young, dashing young man, John F. Kennedy. He was coming to Peoria in order to give a speech there on Main Street in the courtyard. And I was Illinois policeman directing traffic near the airport, the Peoria Airport. And I saw this tall, thin Irish man as he was waving and smiling at everybody. And I said, I like that guy. I'd seen him on television debating with different people. And I said, I really like this guy. I felt an attachment to him, like many of my people did, because he was saying the things that needed to be said at that time. He wanted equality for all Americans, regardless of race, creed, or color. And he was sincere about it. You could see it in his eyes. So I was appointed to escort Fred Backstrom, who was a special agent in charge in the Springfield office, around Peoria when the senator was in town. He was making surveys and solving some counterfeiting cases. And they told me to escort Backstrom around. In that process, I said, Mr. Backstrom, do they have any Negro agents in the Secret Service? He says, there might be. He said, I think they may have one in New York, but I'm not sure. He said, if you're interested, make an application. I'll see what I can do. I made an application, and on October 30, 1960, I became a Secret Service agent. And in that avenue, that direction, on April the 28th of 1961, we had a new president, John F. Kennedy. I was a Secret Service agent stationed in Chicago. Now, the agents in Chicago, whenever the president came to town, we were dispatched on certain security posts where the president was going to be speaking. Instead of putting me in a position where I could see the president, they relegated me to one of the uniform officers' position, guarding the restroom in the basement, one that was set aside for the president alone. About 8:30 on April the 28th, 1961, the president was due to come to town. Now, see, the president won Cook County by 8,000 votes, and that's why Kennedy was coming there, to thank Mayor Daley and his Democratic machine for those 8,000 votes told that he won. Now, Kennedy was a pragmatic man, so he knew very well that 7,999 of those votes were dead. But that's the way Cook County ran. So, you know, in Chicago we had a motto back then, you know, vote early and vote often. You know, and so that's the way elections went in Cook County. Now, I'm standing down there by the washroom minding my own business. Had given up seeing the president at all from that perspective. And all of a sudden I heard a big commotion up on I could see up the steps. Photographers were running, tripping over each other. You know how they do when a dignitary comes in. Cameras flashing and everything. And I looked up at the top of the steps. I was saying, I sure wish I could go up there and see the president. But lo and behold, I see the president is walking down the steps to my location. The first thing that the president wanted to do when the motorcade stopped was use the washroom, and there I stood. There I stood. So the president walked up to me, and he stopped in front of me. And I didn't know whether to run or what. You know, this is some experience. The president of the United States stopped right in front of you and looking you dead in the eye. You wonder what's going on here, Mr. President. But anyway, he looked at me and he says, are you a Secret Service agent or are you one of Mayor Daley's finest? I said, I'm a Secret Service agent, Mr. President. And one of the other agents said, he's Agent Bolden. He's stationed here in Chicago. The president looked at me and he smiled, a wonderful smile. When he smiled, everything about him smiled. And you could tell he was a good man in heart. He looked at me, he said, Mr. Bolden. He says, has there ever been an African-American Negro Secret Service agent on the White House detail, looked at him. I was surprised. I said, not to my knowledge, Mr. President. And he says, would you like to be the first? I said, yes, sir, Mr. President. He said, I'll be looking forward to seeing you in Washington, D.C. And by golly, on June the 6th of 1961, I got orders to report to the White House detail in Washington, D.C., and became the first African-American in the history of the United States Secret Service to be appointed to that detail. He gave me that honor. A great man he was. President Kennedy had a heart of gold. I don't know anything about his morality, but I do know that around that White House, he treated everybody the same and demanded that they follow the law so far as he was concerned. Now, the president was hated, though. And much to my chagrin, I found out that some of his bigger detractors were agents that were surrounding him. They were the one who, out of the earshot, they were going whispering around talking about he's a nigger lover. He should be dead. I'm talking about security agents that's supposed to be watching him. And they detested him because of his immigration policies. And we loved him for it. President Kennedy was looked upon among the so-called Negroes here in America as a savior. We actually idolized President Kennedy. That was because we saw in him what we hadn't seen in other presidents. And that was an empathy for all mankind. He wanted to level the playing field, and you could just feel it when he talked. There was no trickery in his language. He came right straight down front with the way that he felt that the government should operate. And he was hated for it. So, during my stay at the White House, the longer I stayed there, the more outspoken his agents detail got, until finally one of the supervisors of the Secret Service, the supervisor, my shift supervisor, Harvey Henderson, we were in Hyannisport, Massachusetts. Now here's a man who had a real alcoholic problem. He would report for work drinking, dead drunk, wouldn't even know where he was. Sometimes people would stand on his post in order, to cover for him. So we came in from the Kennedy compound after the president had paid me a great compliment by introducing me to several members of his family, his brother Robin, and we stood there and had a conversation. And that just tore Harvey to pieces. He was really, quote unquote, what we used to call a redneck. This guy was way out there. Harvey told me, as he was finishing about his fourth beer, he looked at me and he said, Bolden. And I said, what? He says, I'm going to tell you something, and don't you ever forget it. He says, you're a nigger. You were born a nigger, you were going to die a nigger, and you'll never be anything else but a nigger. So I act like one. I'm talking about the supervisor in the Secret Service. This is a man having responsibilities to carry out the president's orders and to protect and defend the Constitution of these United States of America. And that's what he told me. But I retorted to him, I said, I love you too, Harvey. I love you too. So whatever he meant for me, right back at you. Because I was not going to disgrace the President of the United States, my race, my nation, the American people, by having a physical battle within the Secret Service, within the agent. I was determined not to do that. But I did ask off the detail. I had just seen too much. It was sickening how the agents were misusing government property, talking about the president, talking about Jacqueline Kennedy, all kind of rumors. It was just ridiculous and how lax that they were in protecting this man. I asked the agent, leading agents, some of them were here in Dallas, what do you do in case that shots are fired at the president? Play it by ear. That's what that was the instruction. Play it by ear. They played it by ear in Dallas here too, didn't they? They played it by ear because they had no plan, and there were so many enemies within the Secret Service ranks that wanted the president dead, and I'm not afraid to say it. They wanted him dead because why? Because he was screwing up the country by integrating the schools in the South. And there were other things that were going on. We intercepted, the Secret Service had intercepted and had transcripts of conversations between Cuban organizations, right-wingers, people saying, how do you think that would be the best way to kill President Kennedy? And he would say, with a high-powered rifle from a tall building. Listen, we knew that long before that it happened, that this is what at least two organizations were planning to do, was shoot the president from a tall building with a rifle with a scope on it. This is what was being discussed. You think that information was spread around the government agencies? No, the Secret Service sat on those files. They made no effort to bring these people to justice, even though they had recorded in Miami these types of conversations. And in Chicago had received a telephone call as late as November the 2nd of 1963. And that telephone call came in to Mr. Maurice G. Martineau, who was the SAIC, and said the president was going to be assassinated when he reached Jackson Street in Chicago, Illinois. That was the message. Many investigative agencies have been to Chicago to investigate. They can't find hide nor hair of that conversation that was had. They cannot find an investigation. The Secret Service destroyed it. So I became the complainer in the Secret Service. I told them under no uncertain terms, look, your job is to protect the elected president of the United States of America, not John Kennedy, not Eisenhower, not anybody. Your job is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And no matter what you think of the person that's holding that office, if you tell me that you're not going to do your job, you should resign. I became a constant complainer, and I knew that they were going to shoot at me. But listen, my people, what wouldn't you sacrifice for the freedoms that we have? I saw freedoms in America at stake. It was bigger than the president of the United States. We had people who were preparing to change our government, and the way that we change our government by other than a ballot box. And that is not democracy. They were making statements like, if we got rid of President Kennedy, I'm talking about conspirators, then President Johnson is going to make things better for us. He's going to give us more money so we can go into Cuba and do our thing. And I knew this, but they shelled me off. you're a young agent. I mean, you don't really understand this. We haven't lost the president, and you're getting all excited about nothing. And then November the 22nd happened. Right away, I went into Mr. Martin's office, and I said, I'll bet you $1,000 to nothing those agents were drunk the night before. And they denied it. Said, no, we weren't drinking, we weren't drunk. I said, oh yeah, they were drinking because that's their modus operandi. And it finally came out that that's what happened. Well, then my name became like mud. You understand? I knew that my days would be numbered. So when the Warren Commission sat, and I'm reading in the newspaper, and I don't see the name of John Hurd in there being investigated. I don't see the name of Echeverria being investigated or interrogated. I don't see any of these investigations in the paper. These people are not being called. People who had threatened the life of the president. And so I said, by golly, I told Agent Cross, when I get to Washington, D.C., I'm going to go before the Warren Commission. I was under the misimpression that they were looking for the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I had no idea, as I know today, that the Attorney General, Acting Attorney General Katzenbach, had authored a memo which said that Lee Harvey Oswald must be the man, and him alone, that assassinated the president. I didn't know that that memo existed. So I went to Washington, D.C. on May the 18th. Went to Secret Service School. I dialed the White House switchboard. I wanted to talk to J. Lee Rankin, who was the general counsel. And they were waiting for me to make that move. When I made that move, the next day, the Secret Service, when I went to school, they went to my hotel room, packed all of my goods up, got me an airport ticket to Inspector McCann and another agent, and flew me into Chicago under a bogus lie that I was needed in Chicago for an investigation. But when they said that we just cracked a counterfeiting plant in Villa Park and that we need you for the investigation in Villa Park, I knew they were lying. Not unless the counterfeit plant that they busted needed a janitor or something like that out there. No, not in Villa Park. People had left Chicago and established a community in Villa Park to get away from me. And I knew that. So unless they needed a floor sweeper, oh, that was nothing for me in Villa Park. So I knew and felt that they were lying. They brought me into Chicago, set me down and kept me. Oh, that sounds good. They set me down, kept me going. I got a music background. Thanks a lot. For 6 hours, without charging me with anything. And finally, Mr. Martin walked in and he says, we're going to charge you with soliciting a bribe. I said, you know that's ridiculous. He said, you can't prove it. My God, you know when the government is after you, when they want you, they can cook up a case on anybody. And like she said, my mic. Mic's going out, but I can hear the music. Can you hear me good? Can you hear me now? Yes. So when they came up with these bogus charges,
They're after you, Abram.
they're after me. Which one of you in here is CIA? Just raise your hand. Yeah, But certainly I knew that I had been set up, but there was not a whole lot that I could do about it. And especially when the testimony had come in the first trial and the judge called the jury out of the jury room and said that, now, in my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, the defendant here is guilty of all counts in the indictment. Hey, and sent them back in and said, now go in and vote on the instructions that I just gave you. I knew, this is a railroad on fast item. Huh? But that jury didn't find me guilty, and so they gave me another trial. The next trial, my attorney and all of us, everybody who had something to do with the defense, was locked out of the court building while the jury deliberated. And of course they found me guilty. If that had been the end of it, fine. But I knew that the government was not going to stop with that, because they didn't want the public to know about Echeverria. They didn't want them to know about the Miami conspiracy. And they knew that I knew, even though at that time, did you know that people were saying that I was a psycho, and I was telling them that we had recordings and things of conversations of men saying that they were going to do exactly what Oswald did? People were showing me. They thought that I was having some kind of delusion or something, that I was trying to get back at the government because I was telling them these things. And I was telling them that Joe Noonan, who was investigating the Echeverria case, he came to me and we had a conversation, and he said, Abe, there's something wrong here. He says that the CIA is interfering with my investigation of this case. He didn't say that the FBI, he said the CIA was interfering with his investigation of a plot to assassinate President Kennedy. He looked at me and said, oh man, you're a nut. Can't believe anything like that. And you have people still today don't believe that that happened. So, when they locked me up at Terre Haute, I knew that they were going to spring the master plan sooner or later. That's how the government works. They're going to either declare you insane, you're going to commit suicide, or they're going to beat you down to the earth to where nobody will have any confidence whatsoever in what you say. So they put me in the camp at Springfield, Missouri. Now, I knew the reputation at Springfield, Missouri. See, they ease you in there in the camp, and soon as the publicity dies down, they ease you into the psychiatric section, declare you insane, and hold you for the rest of your life. That's what they had in store for me. So 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 guards came to my little bunk and said, Bolden, follow me. I pulled on my trousers, went to put on my shirt. They said, no, it's okay, come on, let's go. They walked me through that building. The only thing you could hear was the clicks of the soles of our shoes and the jangling of the keys. They took me over to a section that they called 2-1 East. The men in the penitentiary call it the tomb, because when you go in there, you just don't come out. They had people who had been sentenced to 5 years by the court who had been locked up 25 years in 2-1 East because they had been declared insane. And that's what they had in store for me, and I knew it. But I had something in store for them too. Because my parents had taught me long ago that when you get in trouble and you have a problem that you can't solve, you do the best that you can, and then let God do the rest. And I remembered that. And so I placed my whole faith upon God. I did. That's all that I had. They had taken my shoes from me, my clothes, my shoestrings. And I was in there with no one. And death looming over me, not knowing whether or not I would ever get out of there. And they came by, and the guards, there were 4 of them standing at the door. The door came open and they said, medication time. I said, medication time? I'm not on medication. They said, the psychiatrist said, give you this. I said, you have to go through court to do that. You can't just give a person drugs like this. You have to get a court order because I'm refusing. They said, oh, you can refuse all right, but you're going to take it. You're going to either take it like this, or we're going to give it to you in your rear end. But he didn't say rear end. So they said, so I took the little cup and I took the drugs. But I knew that I had to defeat this some kind of way, because they start you on these little mild drugs and they get heavier and heavier the longer you're there. And then they got you on Thorazine, and then they got you all on all these old fancy names of drugs. And I saw inmates outside of my little window. When I would look out there in the lobby, they had to think to breathe. They have them so they have to think to breathe. They're walking around and they and I'm not exaggerating. And these are lost souls. We could very well be one of them. I didn't feel that I was any better than them. I felt that they were being misused just like they were trying to misuse me. And I had to fight to keep from being in that same condition that my brothers were. And they were my brothers, regardless of whether or not they were right or mine. They still were my brothers. They were God's children. And he cares for all of us. So I said, what am I going to do, Lord Almighty? So my people have told me to depend on you. Here I am. The 10th day I was in there. Sometime I didn't know if I was going or coming. You can't imagine the pressure that I was under. And seeing these people walking past my door in the little window. And some of them are sitting there, they were emotionalists. They just sat there. And I got to fight to stay out of this condition. So one night I laid down, and I'd said my prayers, all right. And I was looking up at the ceiling. It was dark in the room. We couldn't control anything. We couldn't turn lights on and off, couldn't flush the toilet. We couldn't do anything. All of that was done for us. And I saw a light flicker in the right-hand corner of my room. And my God, I said, hey, am I going crazy? Is this stuff working? I said, I know I've defeated the majority of it, but do I have? And then this little light flickered again. And I said, no, I saw it the first time. I'm talking to myself. And all of a sudden the light became brighter and brighter and brighter, like the sun, until I had to almost close my eyes in order not to be blind. And it began to die away, and in the middle of this light, there was a form, the face of a person. I don't know if they were black or white. It was just a shadow. It could have been either one. He may have even been Arab. He could have been Aramean or anybody. But I'm telling you, my people, and believe me, I would not lie about this. Random House said, do you want to put this in a book? I said, sure, I want to put it in a book because it happened. I want to tell the truth. And this image filled my whole body. This is how he communicated. It wasn't as if it was talking aloud, but it asked me questions, and these questions filled my whole inner being. And it said, "What is your name?" And I told Abraham. I didn't move my lips. We didn't converse like that. And that voice seemed like it was filling up the whole room. And he says, "How many children do you have?" I don't know if it was a man or a woman. It was a voice that I hadn't heard before and haven't heard since I said 3. And you know what the voice said? "Fear not. God is with you." And the light dimmered down and went away. I sat up on the side of the bed. I said, "Oh, my God, they got me." I was thinking, "My God, I'm going to wrap this up after this because I know you got to get out of here." And I heard the feet of the guards start running. They were running towards my cell. And I laid back on the bunk like I was asleep. And they took that 5-cell flashlight and they shined it all around my room. They were looking. They didn't go to any other cell. They were looking and they raked it across me and in the corner and over here. I said, "Oh, they heard something too. Or they saw something." I needed to get out that room before they drove me crazy. And the next morning, and I'm going to wrap this up, brother. I'm going to wrap this up. The next morning, I heard bells ringing, and guards were running back and forth and back and forth. And I knew I wanted to get out of that cell. And heard one guard shout and say, "There's a fire in the cell next door to Bolden." And the other guard said, "It can't be." Said, "There's nobody in there. That's a vacant cell." And the other guard said, "Well, it's burning. The whole thing's on fire." And then he said, "Get Bolden out of there." And the 2 guards came, and I unlocked the door, and I walked out. Praise be to God. He got me out of there. I guess I had about 24 hours left. 24 good hours left. It's a very difficult thing. And I could tell you some other things that happened in the book, but I know he wants to move his program along. And, you know, it take me a half an hour just to get warmed up. So you'll be hearing from me. So you watch your papers and everything because the United States of America now needs a new moral authority. We need to return back to the God and the principles that first created us. And if we don't do that, then we're going to be sorry. We're going to leave a mess for our children. And time is a wasting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Hardly any more time. It came. I don't know what that noise. You talking already?